Hit it!
That's what I'm talking about.
Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Maciej Szcześnik, and I'm a developer at ThinkCard Games. I have some AAA experience. I was working on The Witcher 1, The Witcher 2, and The Witcher 3 as lead gameplay designer and lead combat designer. And I was also working at 11-Bit Studios, the company famous of This War of Mine, and soon to release their next big hit game, Frostpunk. I am also a lecturer at the Warsaw Film School, where I teach game design, animation, 3D art, and Unity development. And I've participated in the Neon Challenge. It also so happened that I won that one. And that talk will be about how I did it. So what was the Neon Challenge? A small recap. So it was a challenge to create a real-time environment scene in Unity, obviously. There were over 460 participants, individuals and teams from all across the globe. And yeah, I've actually won that challenge, so I'm super excited and super happy about it. I wanted to talk about how I did it, and actually this talk is more about using Unity to prototype your design ideas, your game ideas with the asset store, with Timeline, and with Cinemachine, because I didn't want to create just a simple animation or a simple real-time scene. I actually wanted to check my ideas for a game that I have in my head for quite some time right now. And I wanted to use that opportunity that Neon Challenge gave to check those ideas with Unity community and to receive feedback. That was extremely important for me. And I was using Timeline and Cinemachine extensively along the way. So I'd like to show my entry right now. Please bear with me. It's 3 minutes long. So as I said, I wanted to create actually a prototype of a game I was thinking about for quite some time. And before Timeline and Cinemachine, I think it would be difficult in Unity because one would have to essentially write everything, script everything, or create the animation in a 3D package, and that would be extremely time-consuming. How did I start to approach that? My main goal was to establish a visual art style or aesthetics of the game, I had to actually take some references. I just took my car, went out, and I visited an abandoned industrial district in a town I live in. It was a foggy morning, and I like this foggy, dense atmospheres. I just find them visually appealing. So I took some photos, and I took notes what I liked about them. So you probably noticed this car and its yellow headlights in the first scene. So that's a photo I was inspired with. And I was obviously also inspired by Simon Stalenhag's and Jakub Rożalski's work. Those are two great concept artists. Black Mirror, Cyberpunk 2020, the classic pen and paper RPG. Blade Runner movies, Chappie, and Elysium, and probably there were more inspirations and references I could point to, but those are the main ones, I guess. This is my asset store library. It's quite big, and I think that using asset store is great for prototyping, and not only prototyping. If you want to be a solo game developer, like I'm aiming to right now, because I want to create this game just by myself, and I know that's crazy, but I just want to test myself, and I think it's going to happen. You need to use those assets, and you need to be smart about them. About creating assets and authoring assets for your game. So here the asset store comes in handy and is very, very useful. I would like to highlight the assets I used to achieve those effects you were able to see in the movie. I used more of them actually, but and you can find the whole list on my Unity Connect Inhuman Kind entry. But those are the most crucial ones. First of all, this HX volumetric lighting plugin from Hitbox team. I think it is responsible for like 80% of the overall effect of those images. As for models and 3D assets, I mainly used Manufactura K4's Modern Ruins and Post-Apopac, and I also used Suburb Neighborhood House by Fineward Studios. They have especially good road materials, and you can find them in the second scene. For foliage, I used Advanced Foliage Pack, and you can also find a lot of vehicles in the background of the first scene. Those are from the Extreme Vehicle Pack. For rendering the whole movie, I had to use MudGoat's super sampling to achieve this crisp image, and Render Monster to render it frame by frame in 4K. So that was I used those two tools to achieve that. And for animating my characters, I used mostly Kubold's animations. That guy has really awesome motion capture animation packs, and I will probably use them also in the final game. For music and sound, I found Mercurius FM Synthwave 001 Cyberpunk music pack, and that one, I mean, you can hear this movie music throughout the whole movie. For sound effects, I used Pro Sound Collection, Advanced Game Sounds, and Universal Sound Effects. I also created some custom assets. I really like 3D modeling, and I find it fun. So that's one of those assets, this flying drone robot Seeker. I call it Seeker. Here we have another another robot. It, it actually resembles Polish militia from the 80s. So it has the same colors and the same markings on it. So that was my inspiration. And I also have a classic 90s car here with headlights and stuff like that. I used Blender and Substance Painter to achieve those results. I know that if I'm going to create that game just by myself, I have to be really smart about asset creation. So I have no time. I have no time for creating high definition and low definition assets and going through all the retopology process. I just have to create low poly assets and add detail in Substance Painter. I also used Krita, GIMP for additional texturing, and Audacity for mixing the audio. So as you can see, I am a huge fan of open source software. Right now, I'd like to walk you through all the stages that I had to take while working on that first scene. The two remaining ones were similar, so I'll just talk about the first one. First of all, I started without any 3D assets. Those are all those 3D cubes from Unity, those standard 3D cubes that everyone knows. And I didn't use any textures, any sophisticated materials just yet. But what's important, I already imported the HX volumetric lighting plugin, and I already used Cinemachine to establish my camera angle and post-processing stack V2 to have all those post-processing effects. So that enabled me to see, first of all, to experiment with the overall feel of the scene and to see a final effect or as soon as possible. And I used a very common color scheme here. So you have blue background lighting and an orange or yellowish point of interest. After that, I was adding some materials to the mix and also some models to just see how it all fits. I've decided that I will create a parking lot because parking lots are quite easy to create. So that was my idea because I had to do it quickly. So I put a lot of different vehicles from this extreme vehicle pack. And I've added some 3D models from Manufactura K4's Modern Ruins, if I remember right. The next step was to add my own assets. So those are those droids or drones or whatever you call them. And I also added my car there. I immediately noticed that I have to make it. I have to turn its lights on to create another point of interest in the image, so we can read this image from left to right, kind of smoothly. And after that, I also noticed that the right side of the image is super empty and boring. So I had to just turn the car like that. And now it's a bit better because this fog coming out of the lights again creates interest. And I also added this hotel neon sign, not because it was the neon challenge, just because I thought that I need to balance the image a bit more. And I posed my characters using timeline, so they are playing just one looped animation here. Because I just wanted to see how they will look like with their final poses. You may also notice that I added some trees. Those are the free speed T trees that everyone is using. And they create a V shape on the image. So I used it actually to guide your look, your sight to the center of the image. Here I added the final girl model that I created using Mixamo Fuse, and I played around with it in Blender and Substance Painter. And I also changed that placeholder terminal to the final one. So that's the difference here. So I was just gradually adding a new detail at the moment. And as you may see, the center of the image here is extremely boring. There's nothing there. Like basically, there's a hole. So I had to solve it. I've added 2 police bikes and animated their lights. And I also changed those street lamps to something more interesting and futuristic. Those are really simple models made in Blender. They don't even have UV maps and textures. Just simple models. Next was the time to add some foreground and far background elements, again, to make this image more appealing, more interesting. So now it appears like we are hiding behind something and observing the action. And there's a very small change here, but I saw that this yellow drone droid leg is levitating. You may not be able to see it right now here, but it's actually a bit above the ground. So I added a garbage can to mask it out a bit. Yeah, I just needed some tricks like that. And that's the final image. You may notice it is a bit brighter. I had to do it because when I exported the movie for the first time just to test it out in YouTube, it turned out too dark. So I had to figure it out. And I added a simple dialogue system. I wouldn't call it that. It's just a really simple script that takes a single string as an input, and then displays it on a text component attached to a world space canvas, also known as the text bubble here, and it does it character by character, so it looks like it's animated. It was just easier this way than doing it with timeline, I guess. And speaking about timeline, I used just one huge timeline asset, so everything is in here. I have a ton of track groups there. When I'm starting to expand them, it gets scary, but that enabled me to synchronize everything in just one huge file. So I was able to easily preview the whole thing, and it was just more efficient, actually. You may notice that I use Cinemachine track here. So I animate all the cameras by just blending static shots, static Cinemachine shots. There are also all the sounds in the timeline, music, just basically everything. So it's ready to record and then send to YouTube or whatever. It took me 10 days to create the first scene. I was working after hours, and I also took the freedom that I'm working from home, and I have my own company, to work full days on it. And it took 10 days because, first of all, I had to learn timeline and Cinemachine. It was my first encounter with those tools. Previously, I actually didn't plan to use them for the game, but now I kind of do. And I had to come up with this visual style. I wanted to check if it's going to be coherent, and if I will create another 2 scenes or whatever the number of new scenes would be, if it would be coherent between them, right? So if I would still see that this is the same game, that was my goal. And I also had to create all the models, so it took around 10 days. The second scene was just 2 days, which was quite amazing for me, because it showed me that right now I can prototype new scenes very, very fast, and I can check gameplay elements, story elements, whatever I want, with timeline and Cinemachine and all those things that I've developed before. And the last one, which I'm actually most proud of, took me just 1 day. So that was really, really fun to create. I've managed to solve a few design challenges or design problems during or after the prototype, or maybe even during the time I was working on it. First of all, I think I found the visual style for the game, which is extremely important for me. And this style is, I call it smart, because, as I said, I want to make a visually appealing game, but I am aware of that when I will be working on it just alone. I have to use some tricks, right? Because it's not going to end well if I would like to model everything and have high fidelity details, fine details everywhere. So first of all, you may notice that the camera never frames characters in close-ups. There is always some distance. You always see a full character, which enables me to have less detail. And that basically that rule is true for all the assets, all the models. And since I have this dense fog and colorful lights, it's visually appealing, but I do not have to, for instance, model background elements, which saves time. And speaking about camera, I also figured out how the camera will work in that game. At first, I thought that I will use just a simple top-down view, kind of like in Diablo games or XCOM games. That was a natural approach, but since this game will have story elements, dialogues, and various actions, not only tactical combat, it turned out to be just boring. And now I'm confident that I can show the action and the story elements with different cameras, blend between them, and it will simply work. So that's really important for me. And I also was able to check some core gameplay concepts in the prototype. So right now I can imagine how the game will play, how one will play the game. Obviously, I have some plans for the future. So right now I'm working on a playable prototype. I also want to create a tutorial. I was asked to create a tutorial on how to make such environments. I didn't mention that I don't use any baked lights here because again I had to do it really quickly. I am a huge fan of rapid iterations, and at the moment of me making this, baking lights would slow me down, so I had to skip it, right? And I'm also thinking that I will experiment with timeline a bit more, because as I said at first, I didn't plan to use timeline nor Cinemachine in the game at all. But right now, I actually see potential in timeline for in-game interactions, action points for characters, and some interest points, things like that. So I think I will use timeline for animations that don't break or interrupt gameplay. That's basically it. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer. And if not, you can reach me at www.thinkhardgames.com. There's all the contact you need there. Any questions?
Feel free to run the video for anyone who hasn't seen it. If you want to see it, if you haven't seen the video.
I can show the video one more time if you, okay, all right. So I'll just, Oh yeah, that will be faster this way, I guess. Yeah. I'll just cut the audio. Not that one. This one. Okay, so do you have any questions? There's a mic there, so if you could, there's a question. There's a question. Hello.
You mentioned that you rendered this out for 4K, but I was just curious, how did it run real time?
Okay, so the question was that I've rendered it in 4K, but how fast did it run the runtime thing? It actually runs in 120 FPS at my home machine, not that laptop, and this is a NVIDIA 970. And so, and I'm using the temporal anti-aliasing from post-processing stack. In that case, obviously. So that's upscaled because when using this MudGoats super sampling, it runs in about 20 FPS. So yeah, that's just for rendering. No more questions? Okay.
So I noticed there were the other options that you didn't select. Like there was the option to help them or not help them at the beginning. I assume, does that exist right now, or was that like, that's an implied option that when you have more time later you would put in? Okay, so I have to repeat the question. So you were asking about that dialog option, right? What would happen if you would choose something else? I mean, right now nothing would happen because it's all in timeline. So it's basically an animation, right? It's not a playable prototype. I am working on a playable prototype right now, but at the moment it's just one long cutscene. No more questions? All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.